Okay, what's up, everybody? So we're gonna start out with this conversation between McToon and Brian Leakey, which I didn't even know he had a channel until today. So thank you, Jason, for finding this. It's only 11 minutes, but it's a really good little convo. So unless there's anything you want to add to it, I'll just start by playing this video.
Yeah, it's a good video. It's kind of just like a he just recaps his conversation with McToon and shows a bunch of evidence of the mainstream science people proving McToon wrong.
Word. All right, I'll get into it here.
Little did Newton know his theory of gravity was accepted as gospel, that the magical pull was an essential property of mass, the theory which withstood and obscured the truth for the next 400 years.
And it is still obscuring the truth due to people like McToon and Fight the Flat Earth and other anti-flat earthers who do not understand the equivalence principle.
If you're in an elevator, for an example, with no doors, or no windows, you can't tell the difference between accelerating up versus if you're nearby a large mass like the Earth and not accelerating up. You can't tell the difference between that because within the elevator, if you don't have an external frame to reference to, you can't tell that they both appear the same in all ways to you. That's the equivalence principle. It's not that the ground is actually rushing up. It's not that you're actually like moving upwards like the Flat Earth Society people think.
So there you heard MC Toon, and either his ignorance or his dishonesty, you choose, but he's attributing the Earth rising up to the Flat Earth Society. That is the equivalence principle. He misdefined the equivalence principle. The equivalence principle states you can't tell the difference if you're in deep space accelerating or standing on the Earth because they are the same. Not just because you can't tell the difference. So the Flat Earth Society was right to call him out using modern physics, because how could we be accelerating upward if we're on a globe? And that is current globe physics. That is current globe gravity. McToon is either dishonest or ignorant in the subject. And I'm going to give so many examples here, he's going to have to go against pretty much current globe physics to deny my point.
Einstein realized that rather than gravity being a force acting at a distance that accelerates freely moving objects downward, we have to say that instead, gravity puts us in a non-inertial accelerated reference frame. And we have to say that the surface is what's being accelerated upward. So, when you were sitting in a chair, you were quite literally being accelerated upward. Quite literally being accelerated upward. Similarly, when we're standing on the Earth, the ground is pushing us up with a real force. And if that force is removed, our body goes from being accelerated to moving inertially. And then in that now inertial reference frame, we see the Earth accelerating upwards. Any deviation from inertial motion is a real acceleration. And real acceleration requires a real force. And real acceleration requires a real force. In fact, when you step on a scale, you aren't directly measuring your mass. You're measuring the force.
It's taught us that gravity is not a force. And that's probably the most misunderstood physics fact ever. Like, even physicists get it wrong all the time. Gravity is not a force. And since there's no force pushing down on you, that means you're currently accelerating upwards. Unless you're watching this from the ISS, in which case, please say hi to the moon. An accelerometer is a device that measures acceleration. If you'd hold an accelerometer steadily in your hand, it'd tell you it's accelerated upwards. This isn't hypothetical, weird, theoretical physics talk. You can buy one and just see what it says. This is an example of how the reading of an accelerometer looks like when it's lying still on a table. It tells you it's accelerated upwards. And this is entirely correct.
How could that work on a globe? Because you're misrepresenting your own model. So what if I show you let's say Veritas, Brian Cox, Sabine Oppenheimer, and a couple others, saying that it's quite literally the ground rising up, that gravity is not a local phenomenon. We measure it, therefore it's apparent. The force is quite literally the ground rising up to meet that. But no, I mean, I wanted to get past that so we could move forward, and I had an argument to go with it, but I wanted to make sure you accepted your own model. For some reason, you don't. I don't know why.
I did nothing to either accept or not accept anything. My point was you are doing an appeal to authority, and you're cherry picking out of context. So
no, I pretty much learned from them and looked at all the evidence, and the more and more I researched it, the more I realized the Flat Earth Society was right to call y'all out on an upward rising Earth, because how could that work on a globe?
Well, the only force in that reference frame is actually the ground, not gravity.
Now I want to ask you, are you watching this video in...
Sorry, I just had to pause it for a second because that was so funny that McToon is like, oh, it's an appeal to authority when that's
Right?
all that he does.
Yeah, that's all any of them do. They appeal to authority. They don't know any of this
Right?
stuff. They're just
And
saying what other people say.
yeah, now all of a sudden, well, the authority was wrong in this case. Okay, so could the authority be wrong in other cases too, maybe? Anyways, sorry, I'll keep playing it.
in an
No,
inertial
that
frame
was
of reference? Well, I mean, do you feel weightless? No. So you are not an inertial observer. Your situation is exactly the same as someone accelerating on a rocket ship in deep space. And let me be clear, I don't mean that being at rest in a gravitational field is like accelerating in a rocket. I mean, it is the exact same thing. You are accelerating and there is no gravitational field. Gravitational fields do not exist. Now, gravitational fields do not exist.
Isaac Newton described it as a force, but today we say that when something falls and accelerates, no force is making it do that. Even more counterintuitive, the acceleration of gravity is actually upward. It's not downward.
I did some research into globe gravity and Einsteinian, and I found out that the 9.8 meters per second approximation is apparent gravitational acceleration. It's not gravity, okay? Anything moving in a straight path, like anything falling straight down, that's not gravity. Gravity is moving in curved geodesics, okay? And so actual gravity is not a local phenomenon in Einsteinian relativity. It's literally the ground rising up to meet the apple. Do you agree with that?
no. You're talking about the equivalence principle.
What part of that did you disagree with?
Yeah, the ground rushing up part.
Okay, so it's not an apparent gravitational acceleration?
In Newtonian physics, gravitational attraction and gravity are one and the same thing. Masses are the source of a gravitational force, gravity, which thereby causes gravitational attraction. In general relativity, however, gravitational attraction is only an apparent phenomenon. It's fake.
In standard Newtonian physics, we draw your weight force, the force of gravity pushing you down, and the normal force from the floor pushing you up. We say these forces are equal and opposite, so there's no net force on you, so you are not accelerating. But in general relativity, gravity is not a force. You have no weight, so the only force on you are these normal forces pushing you up. So you are accelerating upwards.
If you hold an accelerometer still on the surface of Earth, it's indeed accelerated upward. Why does that surprise you? If you hold something on your hand, you feel that it's pressing against your hand, downward. It's like when you're trying to accelerate a car with your hand, it'll push against it. If you hold something in your hand, that's not the gravitational force pushing it down, because gravity isn't a force. It's pushing on your hand because you are accelerating it upward. Why?
There's only one force, and gravity's not a force locally. Gravity in Einsteinian physics, the force is quite literally the ground rising up. They call it the normal force. Okay, you can say relative. Yeah, we measure it relative. Okay, but as far as the force goes, so I'm not talking about the kinematics. I'm talking about the dynamics. As far as the force goes, It's the ground pushing up in Einsteinian physics.
I like how he said it's the dynamics, it's not the kinematics. So when you hear Alan or Shane or somebody saying like, "Oh, it's kinematic," "Oh, it's like no, it's
Yeah,
measurable, it's dynamic."
exactly. They try to say no. That's all you're doing is measuring kinematics whenever you do this. When you say the Earth is rising up, but no, we have it on our side because we're the only one that can measure it for it.
Exactly. All right, this is almost done. I'll stop pausing it now. Sorry.
Where you have accelerating frames of reference, you have apparent gravitational attraction. So the first important takeaway here is that this apparent gravitational attraction is not gravity. It's just an accelerated frame of reference. Let's return to the surface of the Earth. You're probably most accustomed to experiencing gravity here in your day-to-day life. It might shock you to learn then, at the surface of the Earth, there is no gravity. None whatsoever. At the surface of the Earth, there is no gravity. None whatsoever. The reason the apple falls to the earth is due to the fact that you, the observer, are accelerating upward. You, the observer, are accelerating upwards through space at 9.8 meters per second squared. You and the ground beneath you are literally rushing up to meet the apple, as well as towards anything else that might happen to be falling at that moment. And that is the true cause of apparent gravitational attraction. The fact that you're accelerating when you believed yourself to be stationary.
I'm just trying
Brian.
to understand what you
All right.
think.
Yeah, all right,
Because
I'll
you're
tell you.
denying your own
I'll
model.
tell you. No, I'm not. I haven't.
Yeah, you
I
are.
haven't. But I will. Okay, fine. You just say that, Brian. I'm done talking to you.
Whoa, that's McToon triggered right there.
That's
Fine.
hilarious.
All right, sorry, this is only a minute left here.
Einstein's theory, this is called the principle of equivalence. In fact, if according to Newton's law, a person falls down due to gravitational force, then according to Einstein's theory, it's due to the absence of a force that pushed the person up. That is, a person is affected by the force generated by the elevator floor, but it is not gravity. This also implies that we are always in a state of acceleration unless we're in a state of free fall or inertial motion from our point of reference. So then Einstein concluded that gravity and acceleration are one and the same, and therefore we're in a state of free fall until an obstacle appears in our path, which became the basis for understanding that gravity is not a force.
I hope everybody recognized McToon's slickness at the beginning, trying to attribute the upward rising Earth to the flat Earth Society. No, that's y'all's model. That's current globe physics. And if the flat Earth Society wants to argue within current physics, then more power to them. Because I think we can all agree that an upward rising Earth could never work on a globe. So they're arguing within current physics, and McToon's got other flat earthers saying that the Flat Earth Society is a psyop. I don't believe that for a second, man. There's some decent guys over there, even though I think as of recently they took that argument off their board. You know, they're trying to hold Glober's feet to the fire. So I hope I've done a good enough job pointing that out. And
So, yeah, just to point out, I didn't notice he had a PayPal and a Cash App here. That's
Nope.
funny. He's chilling for trying to make them, Weiss bucks or something. I don't know, the Witsit bucks. I'm just teasing. Sorry, Brian, but I just got to give you some shit for that.
Well, I will say that Brian is the only one in his other channel that is the only one I know about, Flat Earth Tests. He's actually the only one that actually does tests that I've seen. He does a ton of tests, so
Yeah,
you know I
except
don't
for,
mind supporting people that actually are doing things.
well, no, I 100% agree, and I'm giving him shit, but I'm also remembering right after TFE, he said I forget, I think it was like 4 or 5 months ago, I posted a couple minute clip of him talking in Geos, talking about how he's not going to do tests. He doesn't need to do tests or
Oh yeah.
anything anymore. And when it comes to TFE, whatever, so we don't agree on some things, but that's okay, like just like the TFE people, like half of the TFE people hate me or more because of me thinking that the Earth is like going up, but we agree that TFE was bullshit. So you're not always gonna agree with everybody on everything, and that's okay. We'll find the common ground and leave the other stuff. Whatever. Those people don't have to listen to these videos if they don't want to. But I find this to be fascinating and super interesting, even though this is, we're kind of late to the game with this video. It's like 9 months ago, but whatever. Um, we also heard him real time talking in Discord many times around that time, so I feel like that was like a big, like a popular time for the Upward Earth conversation,
Yeah,
nine,
like
10 months
10
ago.
months ago. Yeah, 9, 10 months ago, and I've got a bunch of recordings of him. All of us in Discord that are all unlisted. That I might just start, putting them out so people can
Yeah,
hear all the conversation that went on. People that think that we didn't do anything. We were in there talking about this stuff with everybody on Discord. All the deniers. So
yeah, exactly. Um, we were definitely like not quiet about it. We were on the front lines talking with, sometimes there would be 20, 30 people in there listening and chiming in and dogpiling us the same way whenever I talked about TFE in there. We get attacked from people. So to make claims that we just came out of nowhere and we don't really care and we're not really into this, like, whatever, believe what you want. This next little clip of videos or of it's a conversation that you had with Alan, what, like maybe 4 days ago or something? 5 days
yeah,
ago? Um,
yeah, it was like after our last video that we did where we broke down um, his breakdown of Upward Earth and how it was wrong with kinematics and dynamics, um, and how we broke that down. And I wanted to make sure that he saw it so that he could rebut if he wanted to, or tell me what he thought about it. And so I messaged him through Discord, and we had a back and forth for a little while. So that's what this is.
word. So I found it to be really interesting. How triggered he gets at the end and actually kicks you out of Ethercause Discord and blocks
And
you.
blocks me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, really? Like I mean, it's not like you were calling him names or getting like I don't know. I mean, and then now after seeing the Brian Leakey video and knowing, that he's been in their group for a while, so I don't know if he's still in their group or if he's, if he also got banned, like if this is what triggered Alan is like remembering conversations with Brian and getting upset. I have no idea. Brian would have to tell us like what happened there, but clearly this is a sensitive topic for this guy, which is crazy because his whole YouTube is built around this topic. So why would you discourage the conversation and try to block and ban somebody for trying to have a conversation about the thing that you claim to be all about? Um,
Right. And he what he like preaches around like his debunk for the upward rising Earth being a kinematic only equivalence, is exactly what proves him wrong, and being that it's the exact opposite, where it is the dynamic analysis of the system that proves him wrong.
right.
And
So he's
that's why after this conversation, I made a little video, and you'll see that at the end.
yeah. Um, Yeah, it's like he doesn't he claims we don't understand, but it seems like either he doesn't understand or he's a gatekeeper. It's one of the two. Not really sure. Um, but yeah, I do also remember when you in the beginning you talk about um your video for your demonstration from how long ago was that now? Like a year and a half, 2 years ago, longer? Can't remember. The
Um,
the one that was on Speaker's Corner?
Speaker's Corner. No.
Yeah.
Oh, the demonstration I did of Mount Rainier.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, no, that was on TikTok. Like it was like 3 years ago.
Okay.
I had a little TikTok channel whenever, and I was fighting the Globers on TikTok with some demonstrations of what they were saying proved the globe, and I made some demonstrations of a couple different phenomena. I did the Lake Pontchartrain Bridge demonstration showing that it was just an atmospheric effect. And I did the Mount Rainier shadow on a flat surface showing that it worked. And I actually deleted that TikTok over a year ago, probably almost 2 years ago. And I didn't know anybody. Oh, I do know that Dave Weiss shared it back whenever I had my TikTok channel. So that's the only other place I knew where it was, because once I deleted TikTok, it was gone. But 2 years later, they're presenting it on Globebusters, and I didn't have any idea that anybody even knew about it.
Yeah, and they didn't like give you credit for it or anything. Maybe he didn't even know that it was you. I don't know. All I know is that I remember you were like, "Oh, look, they're showing my video on Speaker's Corner." And that was what, like
It
6
was
months
on
ago?
Globebusters, not Speaker's Corner.
Oh, my bad. Um what was it? But it was like what, 6 months ago or something that they showed
No, it was
that?
like 2 months ago. 2 months. Like it's like it was like right
Oh,
after they
sooner.
got back from TFE and
Okay.
Witsit. It was like the last Witsit, where
Stream
he
that
was
he
on
was.
Globebusters.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, that wasn't that long ago at all. So I don't know, it's weird. It reminds me of like back in the day when people would do demonstrations and then Globebusters would share it and like not give the person credit of like who it was or where it came from, or they would recreate it themselves, and like I don't know, the community was like fully aware back then of like how they operate, and they still operate the same way. So not surprising. But anyways, so you talk about that for a minute so that he knows obviously that was you, that, while I agree with most of your work, I do believe that the force measured from the ground upward. Oops, I pushed play when I didn't mean to. Sorry. Um, the fact sorry. So I do believe that the force measured from the ground upward is in fact a measurement for Earth accelerating upward. I recently did a response to your video. Um, Sorry, hold on. I recently did a response video to your comments about the upward vector. If you have a time, let me know what you think. He responds with, if it's asserted that the Earth is moving at a constant velocity to give the illusion of an inertial frame similar to an observer in a train, then the Earth can't be the cause of what we measure. Acceleration is time derivative of velocity. If Earth's motion is constant, there is no change in velocity over time, thus no derivable acceleration. I don't know why that's so fuzzy. I uploaded that, sorry. Um, if you're willing to accept energy conservation, or yeah, conservation, kinetic energy. Sorry, I'm not the best reader out loud. I
Yeah, I
can't
think
believe I
these are
say
out
it.
of order. Actually,
What'd you say?
I think these are out of order. Actually, the
Are they? Okay, because that's what I was wondering. I'm like, I'm not sure if this sounds like this is its exact. My bad. Sorry. So they're
no, that's
pretty
okay.
much
Do you want me to? Maybe I'll just read them off
okay.
my, the actual chat and
Okay.
just
Because I think this next one, oh, maybe this is the first one that was supposed to be. If the Earth is accelerating upward, that means the Earth is a non-inertial frame. If it's accelerating at 9.8 meters squared, then before a year, the Earth's traveling faster than light, it becomes untenable or whatever. Sorry, because of that. As 9.8 meters squared of Earth's increase, that would measure also, or that would measure would also increase. That's a weird sentence. Sorry. So was
yeah,
that the first one then? I think that was supposed to be his
yeah,
first.
that was
Okay, my bad. I didn't mean to get them out of sync. Let's see here.
yeah. I should have saw it before when you showed me.
It's okay. I'm not. It's um. So I think this was probably the part that I just read. If it's asserted that Earth is moving at constant velocity. Um.
Yeah,
But I mean, you guys have all pretty much heard. I don't know if you want to read through it more, or if we should just. I mean, it's still, you get the basic gist of his response. It's like, no.
still, he thinks that I have no basis for claiming it's a dynamic cause, a dynamic analysis of the system. If you're analyzing the upward moving Earth, as far as dropped objects and free fall, in relation to the Earth, then um, he doesn't think that there's any dynamic analysis that can be made from that. Which dynamics is all about, factoring in forces, real forces, and not fictitious forces, or coordinate acceleration versus proper acceleration. And I was trying to get him to understand what I was saying, and then he actually sent me, which I already knew about. He sent me Dr. Bennett's presentation showing a dynamic analysis, a real dynamic analysis of a system, and I basically came back with, I have the exact same analysis of my scenario, and that exactly proves him wrong with his, like, I mean, I plug in the same factors with my scenarios he does, that he claims is a dynamic analysis, and it proves that the Earth is moving up, so accelerating up.
Yeah.
So, but he basically gets upset and doesn't understand what I'm trying to tell him when we're going back and forth, or he's, or has no rebuttal and just gets triggered and rage quits.
Yeah, or he's like a gatekeeper and isn't allowed to talk about it or something. But I do like your responses here. Thanks, he said, thanks for the response. I agree that inertial frames of reference don't produce inertial forces. Based on the real dynamic force measured by an accelerometer on the ground, not just an optical measurement of coordinate acceleration, Earth's surface is non-inertial relative to the objects in free fall, where no actual dynamic force is measured. Just like in the scenario with the car accelerating towards a hitchhiker, we know the car is non-inertial because there is an actual force measure on the car with an accelerometer. We are following the laws of physics while analyzing objects in free fall dynamically. The only empirical conclusion is that the Earth's surface is accelerating upward, unless you can, let's see, uh, unless you can recreate or point me in the direction of a demonstration of a force that can simultaneously accelerate all states of matter equally without displacement. I don't see any reason to correlate rotations in the sky with objects in free fall while analyzing this, unless you have some empirical evidence of objects that are rotating above us, then falling to the Earth. So that's a good point because, like, we talked the other day about that building in like Seattle, I think it is, where like the top of the building rotates around so you can like see the city or whatever, and the whole bottom of the building is stationary. Like that's like claiming the whole building rotates just because the top part of it rotates, you know?
Because they always go back to like Newton's bucket example for the, inertial frame versus non-inertial frame of reference, but that's a rotation, and we the only rotation we experience on the ground is relative to the sky. We don't experience a rotation relative to our local area of things falling. Things don't fall down in a horizontal direction. They go straight down. That's what we have to work with. So correlating the sky rotation to objects falling here on the ground, on the Earth's surface, I don't see the correlation. I don't see why it always goes back to that.
Yeah. And the Michelson Morley, like we don't deny the existence of an ether or whatever. I mean if it correlated with the Michelson Morley, then wouldn't objects be falling down like on an angle, like sideways? Like I mean that's what the whole point of the vertical interferometry test was to show that it's a different force other than the horizontal, So
Right.
um, yeah, or a different movement. I shouldn't say force because, well, I guess force coming up, whatever. Anyway, so his response was the dynamics of free fall involve vector subtraction. If you're in free fall, you're not experiencing any inertial force because you're moving with the downward vector. None of what you're proposing is mutually exclusive and falls under dynamics, which is not true.
Wrong.
Uh,
Yeah.
if, oh, you want to keep going?
Yeah.
If
Yeah. Go
you're
ahead.
If you're a stick in a river perpendicular to the flow being held in place, the force you feel is the water pushing against you. You feel that force. When you let go of the stick and it's moving with the water, the stick no longer feels the force of the water, but it's moving along with that direction. And then he did the Space Audits clip, which is the Newton's bucket, whatchamacallit here.
Yeah, the Newton's bucket thought experiment, the dynamic analysis of it, and then he also sent the car analysis of the accelerating car towards a hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Uh,
So then he says, I agree that inertial frames of reference don't produce
no, this is
inertial.
him quoting me. Yeah, that's him quoting me.
Yeah, that's him, but it's still his
Yeah, yeah,
response, right? Yeah,
yeah,
so
right.
he's quoting you. I agree. Inertial forces or inertial frames of reference don't produce inertial forces. You misunderstood my request, and I don't what you'd call a lot of patience. I think he's saying I don't have what you'd call a lot of patience. If I wanted to reassert the claim in question that the Earth's moving by affirming the consequences, I wouldn't have bothered asking for an example of an inertial frame producing inertial forces. What you'd okay, so isn't isn't non-inertial to an object in free fall and also inertial for everyone standing on it. That's why I started with that simple of an argument. You'd have to invoke fictitious forces. Oh wait, where is that? We're on Earth, we're in free fall. There's a fictitious force acting on because the Earth is actually accelerating. You wouldn't be able to satisfy conversation, laws, or energy prediction, etc. That's why I asked about if you'd be willing to accept dynamic analysis. What you're proposing isn't even on the table. You just haven't gotten there yet. You're still thinking kinematics and arguing illogically to maintain a cause for why objects fall. Don't get too carried away or you'll just end up like the Royal Society holding onto a dead model, just hoping the public isn't smart enough to realize it. And
Yeah,
then your response was perfect. I apologize for wasting your time and your patience. To be clear, my position is that Earth as a contained system. Oops, I'm sorry, I freaking push play again. Sorry. Okay, so my position is that the Earth as a contained system is accelerating up based on a force acceleration measuring device. Objects, when released above the Earth's surface, have zero force measured on them. This scenario can be reproduced and be reproduced and demonstrated
yeah,
in any other vector with acceleration actually reproducing the effects of buoyancy with the correct direction of the force applied. The claim of a current ether unicorn fart flow that acts on all matter equally except helium balloons, and as buoyancy acting on opposite direction of force may very well be correct, but until at least demonstrated to be possible, that type of force is special pleading. Boom, shots fired. I think that's where he um, probably got the most triggered. Your analogy with the stick in the river breaks down. If you throw that stick upstream with an accelerometer attached against the accelerated current flow, it will read a negative acceleration. On Earth, if you throw an accelerometer straight up in the air against the ether flow, unicorn farts, bendy space-time, it will read no acceleration. Let's see. I think there's one more. Your vector subtraction math is really cool. It can be reproduced physically and demonstrated with
can it
your.
be can it be
Oh,
reproduced?
can it be reproduced physically and demonstrated with your conceptualized causal mechanism without affirming the consequent?
Yeah, that's basically me just saying um, he has all this vector subtraction for everything, and then um, I was just asking if he could reproduce that, with demonstrations showing that a force equally applied to all matter, to where it doesn't show an acceleration relative to each piece of matter or with displacement, basically.
Yeah. And so then he responds,
asking
if
for
you're
demonstration, and then he gives a math equation.
yeah, exactly. He's like, you're not doing dynamics. He's like, here's some more kinematics though, so that you ask for dynamics. If you're saying that the Earth is non-inertial, you'll need to prove it. I can make unlimited dynamic predictions using energy and conservation laws to show my claim. You mean energy and conservation mathematics to show your
Right.
claim?
There's still no dynamics in that analysis. There's no demonstration. Where's the demonstration?
Yeah, where's the demonstration in your words, bro? And then you said you don't mind using the accelerometer to read what force is measured on the car. And then he says, if I told you where, I'd be fucking lying, or rather speculating. And then he said, I can just say that it's
Yeah, that
kinematic.
was like they got out of order because we were going back and forth.
Okay.
Uh, but he was saying that he kept saying that I was using kinematics, and I said, well, you use the accelerometer on the car example. I can just say that's kinematics too. If you're not going to accept my force reading, then I'm not going to accept your force reading.
Right. So I think this was the one that was supposed to be right before that, which would be meaningless. That is kinematics. Do you want to see a dynamic analysis? So of course, and it's not his dynamic analysis. It's it's Bennett's drawing cartoon. And so this is Jason's hammer that we came up with. So here, let me rewind it so you
Right.
can
Let
see
me
what his is.
let's go back and let me show that what force is what they're this is claimed to be a dynamic analysis because they have forces involved, and their measurement of force is the car accelerating. And how do they measure that car accelerating? They have to have a device that measures that car accelerating, which would be a force detector, which would be a spring or an accelerometer that detects proper acceleration. That's his force measurement. We have the same force measurement or same force measuring device sitting on the ground measuring the force. So we definitely have a dynamic analysis. But go ahead
Okay. So
if
this
you wanted to
is
say anything. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this was Jason's idea to like show his I didn't realize how fuzzy it was gonna come. You see how prediction I just whited out like an added thing, but in my phone it didn't look that fuzzy, but on here it's like super obviously fuzzy. Sorry. But anyways, so the toolbox frame, hammer frame, like it's the same concept, but Jason's dropping the hammer on there. Oh, you guys don't have dynamics. You guys can't draw a cartoon picture and show something either. Like, here you go. Um, but yeah, sorry. Let's see. And then, oh, this is
Yeah, just
spring.
force measuring devices, just showing.
Yeah. But here the conversation keeps going. Where is a dynamic force measured? That is the key takeaway from this convo. And Jason says, "Do you think we can measure force?" And he says, "Read the slide." Oh, because he responded to, "Where is dynamic force measured? Read the slide." "How is force measured, Alan?" And then he responds with, "And measuring tells us nothing about the cause. If you take away one thing from this, kinematics equals, damn it, predictions." So once again, he thinks we don't understand what kinematics and dynamics means. Um, kinematics predictions of future motion with no concern for cause. Dynamics equals future motion predicted on forces.
Right. And that's why I kept saying, well, okay, show me. I wanted him to point out where the force was measured on the car example.
Yeah,
And so that I could show him that I have the same force measurement, making it a dynamic prediction too with, any object falling in free fall in the earth at measuring a force upward.
yeah. So, 9.8 meters squared is an acceleration vector. It tells us nothing about why it exists. This just goes on endlessly. How is force measured, bro? We're not even having the same combo at this point.
Right. That's when he blocked me when I tried to send this through because like he wouldn't answer like because if he would just answer how the force was measured in his demonstration, then I could show him that I have that same measurement. But he says that the 9.8 meters per second squared is just go back 1 second, one back
Okay.
slide,
Okay. To the slide or to
or
the
just
last
no, just
comment?
the screenshot before this
Okay.
right here.
Okay.
Yeah, he said the 9.8 meters per second squared is an acceleration vector. It tells us nothing about why it exists. Yes, if you're only going off the 9.8 meters per second measured coordinately, like through a coordinate system, that is just an optical measurement that doesn't have a force applied to it. Like if you just measure something falling with a meter stick and you see how fast it falls, the change in velocity over time, over distance, then that is just a kinematic measurement. But if you use an accelerometer, a force measuring device on the ground that shows the actual acceleration. So one or two things is accelerating. Either the object is actually accelerating with a force applied, or the ground is accelerating with a force applied. We have a measuring device that can tell us which one is doing that. And when you put that on the object falling, it reads no acceleration, no force. If you put that on the ground, it reads a force, it reads an acceleration. That is the dynamic analysis of the system.
Yep. Exactly. Like he keeps claiming that he's showing dynamics, but then when you ask him, he shows the hitchhikers, Bennett's
No, well, the
hitchhiker.
hitchhiker, I agree, is a dynamic analysis because they're saying there's a force there, and they're saying, and you'll see in my video, I go through Dr. Bennett presents it, and he
Mhm.
says we know the car is accelerating with a force because we have a device to measure that, and that's all they have to go on is that force measuring device that is telling them what actually is accelerating. And
Yeah.
so I just flip it and show him how I have my measurement of force.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's the
no,
exact same thing.
yeah, I'm not saying that still isn't a demonstration though. It's a like a cartoon, and it's not his demonstration. It's some Bennett guys,
Yeah.
and
It was just a thought experiment. And that's what they were relating it to, the Newton's bucket thought experiment.
yeah, and that's fine, but like, at some point they're gonna have to do a demonstration proving that their ether is what causes objects
Right.
to fall. Like
Exactly.
they can't just keep feeding people mathematics and, kinematics and pictures and cartoons to flat earthers who are like, "Hey, no, we want to see real life, like real measurements, real tangible things. You can't just keep feeding cartoons to us." You know?
Yeah, just like a gravitational field that can't be proven. Like
Yeah.
that's what the mainstream that don't even understand general relativity say, that everything's in a gravitational field, that everything's accelerating down together equally. Um, that's the same thing that ether guys have to do. They have to say that there's an ether current flow that everything's accelerating down in, with no measurement of and no proof of, um, other than light propagation sideways, and then with a tiny bit of fringe and then a big fringe if they do it vertically. Um, so that doesn't show it basically shows that light travels faster one direction or the other. Um, yeah, I mean that's a whole nother subject we can get into later.
Right. Well, and I think it's funny too that anytime that I've brought up to anybody that's in the ether about how they measure or how they can prove, um, that ether is why things fall or whatever, like Witsit would always bring up um the Van de Graaff generator, and like that's the only thing I've ever heard anybody bring up is Van de Graaff. But apparently there's like five other things. Like when I looked it up the other day on there's like a field mill, there's some, I forget the names
That's
of all
just
of them.
measuring the electrostatic gradient, though. That's
Yeah, but you'd think that one of them would bring that up over, like, not never once was Van de Graaff brought up as like, it's like a parlor trick more than anything, Um, but that's a whole
it's
other
just
topic.
adding a force to something basically, or changing you know the the charge of something to make it levitate. It's not defying what's making things accelerate down.
Yeah, and Ken had a good idea to put a Van de Graaff on a scale and then see what happens when you put, an object on like
You
with the
levitate an object with on top of the whole apparatus and see if the weight actually changes.
right? Because that hasn't been done from what I've been looking for the past week for a video of that and haven't. So now I think that's going to be something we're going to have to do is like build a Van de Graaff and put it on a scale and do some of our own. Since they're clearly not interested in proving their own side, we're gonna have to like prove it or disprove it for them because they just want to sit and like point out math equations all day. But let's play your video where you're actually addressing this a little bit better, and I'll stop talking.
Forces to make.
Oh, hold on, let me rewind it.
That section of the calculation is called dynamics, when you introduce actual forces to make predictions of future motion.
The prediction of motion involves quantities that we discussed before, distance, velocity, time. In addition, you have quantities that are characteristic of whatever you're measuring. So mass, force, moment of inertia, charge, Q, all of these things are particular qualities of motion. In kinematics, you only trace the path or the trajectory of motion. In dynamics, you must include mass and force and force and force.
Kinematics primarily deals with coordinate acceleration, while dynamics considers proper acceleration as the true acceleration reflecting the influence of forces. Proper acceleration is experienced by an object independent of any particular coordinate system. It is measured by an accelerometer. And represents the actual change in velocity due to forces acting on the object, making it a dynamic quantity.
Yeah. Oh, here's a good summation of the Newton's bucket. Here's a great way to another way to look at it. Here we go.
Reference frame. Now, I tried to update this experiment by doing something that's more familiar. Newton's bucket, the experiment is named after him, so I'm going to call this Bennett's hiker. We have, first of all, a hitchhiker frame, which is the same as the lab frame. If you have a car accelerating towards you as a hiker, and you ask, what do the laws of physics predict? Then the prediction is the force on the driver, Fd, is equal to the mass of the driver times the acceleration. So Newton's law says the driver should have a force exerted on it. And we all know this is true. If you're accelerating in a car, you can feel the car seat pressing on your back.
If you're inside a car and the driver steps down hard on the gas pedal, causing acceleration, you will feel as if you're being pulled towards the back of the car. This feeling of being pulled backwards is your body feeling proper acceleration.
And you could measure it with the appropriate equipment. So if you are in the hitchhiker frame, which is the lab frame, Newton's law is correct. Suppose you use the reference frame of the driver. In the driver's frame, you see the hitchhiker accelerating towards you with minus a acceleration, and you want the force on the hiker to be equal to the mass of the hiker times his acceleration. All right, the calculation shows that this is not zero. But we know that when a car passes you and it's accelerating, you don't feel any force. You may feel a slight breeze from the air that's moving past the car. But unlike the driver, anyone stationed in the lab frame will not feel any force.
Proper acceleration is experienced by an object independent of any particular coordinate system. It is measured by an accelerometer and represents the actual change in velocity due to forces acting on the object.
Now, I tried to update this experiment by doing something a little more familiar. Bennett's hiker is named after him, so I'm going to call this Jason's hammer.
Drop in the hammer! No, you're not!
First of all, we have the hammer frame, which is the inertial frame. If you have a toolbox sitting on the ground accelerating towards you as the hammer, and you ask, what do the laws of physics predict? And the prediction is the force on the toolbox, Ft, is equal to the mass of the toolbox times the acceleration. So Newton's law says the toolbox should have a force exerted on it, and we all know this is true. If we are standing on the ground next to the toolbox, you can feel the ground pressing on your feet, and you can measure this with the appropriate equipment. So if you're in the hammer frame, which is the inertial frame, Newton's law is correct. Now suppose you use the reference frame of the toolbox. In the toolbox frame, you see the hammer accelerating towards you with minus a acceleration, and you want the force on the hammer to be equal to the mass of the hammer times its acceleration. The calculation shows this is not zero. And we know when a falling hammer passes you and it's accelerating, free fall, you do not feel any force. You may feel a slight breeze from the air moving past the hammer, but unlike the toolbox on the ground, anyone in the free fall frame, inertial frame, will not feel any force.
That section of the calculation is called dynamics, when you introduce actual forces to make predictions of future motion.
Okay, so that was awesome. That explained it really well, a lot better than I could have explained it, so thank you for that. Let's see. There was another video. Sorry, did you want to elaborate on any of that at all, or?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, showing actual dynamic force in the analysis, and why we say that if we're going based on
A force is
dynamic
measured.
analysis of a system like they are with the car and the hitchhiker, um, we're using the exact same analysis with the same factors, and it proves that the Earth is accelerating up. So
Word.
whenever they
Sorry.
say that we're just using kinematics, they're absolutely wrong.
Yeah, exactly. 100% wrong. And sorry, I didn't mean to start playing that. I just wanted to have it up on the screen. And of course, it starts playing immediately right when you're talking. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
But this clip, this is from Alan or not Alan, from Shane, like a day or two after the Alan conversation, after you got booted. I think it's pretty funny that, like, I feel like you were really respectful in your responses to him. A lot more respectful than he was, at least with sticking to the topic and whatnot. But this just, it just really shows how um, either how much of like a gatekeeper he is, or how like in denial he is about the what his whole channel is like dedicated to, like and the fact that like they're clearly not open minded to, or not, I shouldn't say they, Alan clearly isn't open minded enough to have the conversation. Like he doesn't want to have the conversation, he just wants to boot people that might have a different opinion or might look at things in a different way, which is really surprising considering the pretty respectful conversation we heard between him and Dell, a year ago or whatever. And the fact that, he didn't rage quit on Dell, but they're also kind of saying the same thing, like um when they're not, they are, but they're not. It's like I don't know. There I see similarities just like with the Glover's gravity in what they're talking about, but um I don't know. To me, they're both gatekeepers, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. It sounds messed up to say, but I don't know how. I mean, he doesn't seem stupid, so I don't know. Like, I don't want to just say, oh, he doesn't understand what kinematics and dynamics is, because
He
he,
definitely understands what they are. He just chooses to admit the thing that refutes his claim, on our side. So
yeah. Um, but yeah, I just thought the timing of Shane dropping this video right after that conversation was pretty funny. So I'll just play. It's only a minute here.
A force is measured, and when you come across an acceleration that yields no measurement, you know one thing for sure: you can't make a force responsible for it. This is the case with free fall, which is dynamically indistinguishable from being stationary as in uniform velocity. Ironically, mainstream physics defines the absence of force in uniform motions by the lack of measurability, and at the same time defines the presence of force in free fall also by the lack of measurability. That's the kind of undigested inconsistencies flat earthers are usually accused of, yet mainstream physics is full of them. The greatest conundrum of the 20th century, the incompatibility of gravity with the other, quote, forces of nature, simply evaporates when you realize gravity is not a force to begin with. Objects do not resist to free fall, whereas they resist to being pushed. And this resistance to being pushed is the very definition of force in Newtonian mechanics. No resistance, no force.
So
right. So basically admitting our side that there is no forces in free fall, and that in free fall it's indistinguishable from being at rest. So what's accelerating? If the free fall item is at rest and we measure a coordinate acceleration, where is the proper acceleration coming from? The only other place would be the reference frame, which would be the Earth's surface, and that's where we can measure it with an accelerometer.
Yep. No, you're right. It's pretty surprising how they I'm just gonna exit out of this. Oops. Okay. Um, so yeah, it's pretty obvious that I don't want to say they don't understand, because I feel like after having probably multiple conversations with Brian, Dell, whoever over the past year and a half, like there's no way that they're not understanding. They got to be gatekeepers at this point, in my opinion. Um, talking bad about the Flatter Society page and all that, which in my opinion, those guys actually have um, a lot of good information on their site, and I don't really see anything wrong with sharing information and having forums about this sort of thing. And I don't know, I think it's funny that the people that are the ones asking for the money and asking for donations and trying to like, push TFE and push all this shilly stuff are the ones that are calling the people that are pretty much non-existent in the flat earth world, YouTube world at least, who aren't asking for money and donations, who aren't trying to like make a business out of flat earth, are the ones being called the shills. So,
Yeah.
you know, believe what you want, whatever.
Right. Yeah, I
Is
was
there
just
any?
gonna say, I know that the upward accelerating Earth sounds crazy, um, but it is what is empirically measured and can be reproduced and demonstrated. A magical force that accelerates all objects equally with no displacement, accelerates them simultaneously, like the Dell what Dell has brought to the table with the gas, liquids, and solids in a bottle, and in free fall, they all accelerate, quote unquote accelerate together with no displacement. There is no acceleration there. It's the force that can do that has never been reproduced, demonstrated in any kind of way, period. But what can be demonstrated is a container accelerating upward as the Earth would, and objects in free fall having no forces on them. So our claim can be demonstrated. The other claim cannot be. So what's true and what's more believable in that sense?
Yeah, and just because it's not a popular belief doesn't mean it can't be true. Um, you know, I think that too many people are caught up in like the high school, like, oh, I want to be accepted into this group on the internet and I don't want to think outside the box. But the whole reason why we got to flat earth in the first place was by thinking outside of the box. So if you just all of a sudden stop thinking outside of the box, then can you even really call yourself a truther or a flat earther or whatever? I mean, I don't know. I think, sorry, my little one just woke up blowing her nose in the background. Um, I'm good though. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up, or are you good on this?
No, it's good.
Okay, cool. Well, you all have a good day, and yeah, toodles.